Hi there, Dale. How are you?
I'm great, Destin. How are you?
I'm good. Have you had a great week?
Busier than I expected for the house not sitting.
I know. Well, let's talk about your week, and I don't mean to add to your hectic schedule, but we have to get some topics in here.
All right.
Let's talk about decorum in the house and the shenanigans that have been going on with regards to the carbon tax, not a carbon tax.
Right.
Yes, so this is probably, I think, the third week we'll be talking about it in a row. That said, it's taken on different aspects and sort of different mutations. So, what is it that you're really wanting to particularly highlight about it this week?
Well, they're trying to get the speaker to look into this practice of member statements and the fact that they become increasingly partisan. And by partisan, it's also being used to attack other parties. The NDP in particular have become really sensitive about this because of this carbon tax, not a carbon tax talking point that the Conservatives have really been pushing. And despite the fact that the entire media has called them out on just how wrong they are, they've just buckled down and they're going to go for it regardless. So yeah, they're trying to get the speaker to make some kind of a ruling that they can't make these kinds of statements anymore because they're not for what these member statements are intended for.
How likely is the speaker to rule in their favor, do you think? Because it sounds pretty, well, unlikely is the word I'll use.
I would say it's fairly unlikely unless they can come up with a really good reason for it. But the other thing that gets me is the fact that what's good for the goose must therefore be good for the gander. So in the sense that the NDP complain that the Conservatives have made up all this stuff about a carbon tax for them, they come up with their own stuff that's not true in these statements as well. Like, the government apparently controls the price of gasoline. I'm guessing through magic levers or phone calls to the Illuminati or something, but every day they've been like, well, the price of gasoline's too high, why isn't the government doing anything? Well, because the government can't do anything. There was another one the other day where one of the MPs was railing about how we swear allegiance to the British Crown, which we absolutely do not. We swear allegiance to the Canadian Crown, which is a separate institution. But, this is another one of these fictions that, is politically convenient for whatever cause they're promoting.
So when they say that, the NDP say that they feel the tone is becoming more partisan, they're not necessarily including themselves in the examples they're providing.
It's always interesting how it's always the other person that's the problem. It's never them that contributes to it.
So this appeal to the speaker, in the sense that they're asking him to sort of limit some of, well, I don't know if limit's the word, but look into some of the comments that are being made in terms of the statements that are coming from each party. Is this related to the request for him to limit private members' bills that was made a few weeks ago?
No, and that wasn't actually to the speaker. That was an attempt by a couple of NDP MPs to get the Prime Minister to limit his party's private members' bills, which is a ridiculous
and
idea.
we talked about how ridiculous that was. So that was sort of plan of attack A.
Yeah.
So this is plan of attack B.
Well, it's a different plan of attack, or attack's a different issue, but I mean, they're still trying to prove that Conservatives are bad parliamentarians.
Okay. Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is, how far do you think that the NDP are willing to take this in terms of really trying to get some sort of action on limiting the discussion in the House? Because to your point, when even me saying it, limiting discussion in the House seems counterintuitive to what the House is for.
Yes. And
how far are they going to go before they realize this is kind of...
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, they keep talking about bringing this up, but they always try to put it off on the speaker. It's always they try to make it the speaker's responsibility rather than policing their own behavior.
Okay. Lead by example.
Lead by example, but also if we want the speaker to clamp down on their behavior, why aren't we clamping down on our own behavior? That's the very same thing.
Good point. Touche, Dale. Touche. Let's move the conversation on to Rob Anders, a guy who I would say has had a pretty interesting couple of weeks. He blamed, I believe,
Mulcair
for the
for hastening Jack Layton's death.
For the death of Jack Layton. And now he's started a petition that I know has gotten quite a few people's eyebrows raised on this one.
Yeah. Well, this gender identity bill has been going through the House in various iterations for years. It's made it past second reading again in the Commons. He's adopted a tactic used by certain, shall we say, evangelical groups, which are considering this a bathroom bill, in that they're trying to create this moral panic that this will be licensed for perverts to go into women's washrooms. Now, the thing that gets me about this is that Rob Anders is doing something that a number of other MPs have already been doing. When debate was going on in the House, a couple of other Conservative MPs made speeches on this very same point. Nobody called them out on it at that point. Suddenly, Rob Anders has this petition circulating during the same week that his big mouth got him into trouble. Suddenly, it's panic everywhere, and it makes me just kind of scratch my head that why wasn't this outrage going on when these speeches were made in the House?
And that's a good question. And like you said, maybe it's tied to the fact that a lot of people think Rob Anders is a little bit... I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth here, so I'm just going to leave that as a hanging sentence. But, to your point, a lot of other people have spoken about this issue, but in conjunction with the fact that he sort of blamed the NDP for hastening the death of Jack Layton. When he says something, in particular a bill that's this sensitive, maybe people are going to pay attention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, above and beyond Rob Anders, is this something that we should be worrying about in terms of what the bill is trying to get at? And that's the idea that, it's a human rights issue, as you had mentioned earlier, and the fact that, to me it seems that they're confusing sex with gender.
Yeah.
And implying that, there's dangerous consequences as a result.
And the other thing to note is, in other jurisdictions where this kind of legislation has gone through, this has never been a problem. Okay. And criminal activity is criminal activity, no matter who is perpetuating it. So it's just one of those red herrings that's designed to try and scare people into trying to take it out of being a human rights issue. Just like gay marriage was going to be the slippery slope, that was going to be the bestiality and polygamy and everything else.
So that said, how much traction do you think this petition has?
Not really any.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that someone who was offended by Anders' petition, has decided to start his own online petition to get Rob Anders unseated and have his pension revoked.
Unlikely again, which seems to be the theme.
Yeah. Which and my question is, but what mechanism exactly do they hope to employ to do this? Because unless an MP has been convicted of criminal activity, you can't unseat them.
No.
In fact, it would be a bad thing to give prime ministers the power to unseat MPs, because it's the MP's job to hold the prime minister to account.
That's true. And last time we checked, bad judgment is not a crime.
No. And it goes back to this thing where apparently online petitions, like the Queen, apparently, are magic. They can do miraculous things for which they don't actually have the power to do.
But you feel involved. It's about participation, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of been a blow for civic literacy.
Yeah, for sure. The last topic that I want to get into is security. It's also been a big security week.
It's been a big security week.
We have our first conviction in terms of not conviction.
Yeah, it was conviction in espionage.
In espionage, which was newsworthy for a whole bunch of reasons. So let's talk about that and how it leads to another big security story.
This is going to blow up in the Commons next week, because the tainted beef thing is kind of winding down.
Okay.
So I think this is pretty much going to dominate question period the next couple of days. Calling the Minister of Defense to account, because it was the military brass who didn't catch this sooner. Calling Foreign Affairs to account. Why aren't they calling the Russian ambassador to the carpet over this issue? So I think we're going to hear a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of reminded people that, security is still an issue. Cold War may be over, but these kinds of things still go on.
So that said, is Canada wearing rose-colored glasses in a lot of aspects? And I think this links to the sort of Huawei issue as well.
I don't know if I would say rose-colored glasses because, I mean, our security services seem to be fairly effective in countering a lot of this.
Okay.
In terms of the Huawei thing, cybersecurity issues are becoming more prevalent because they're cheaper in some respects for countries to undertake and less difficult to trace. But at the same time, it's kind of been pointed out that Huawei doesn't have a lot of self-interest in becoming a spying portal, considering how much of the market they need in North America. So if they would engage in this kind of activity, they'd be basically shooting themselves in the foot, kind of thing.
So, what are we to make from the report that was released from the United States and sort of the warning they gave to their Canadian counterparts about the potential security threat of having Huawei operate in the country?
I mean, I think it needs to be looked at, but at the same time, other people have said that this report contains a lot of speculation and not a lot of actual fact, which is kind of significant. There have been other issues with Huawei, as in corruption and bribery and so on like that. I mean, that needs to be investigated, but I don't know that, we need to be careful that, if we're using these kinds of systems for government secure networks, then, we might have some other concerns, but, for using their technology for TELUS and Bell to expand their networks, I don't know if it's as big of a deal.
Well, it looks like we'll have to stay tuned and listen to what happens there because, as you said, the upcoming week is going to be a little bit action-packed in terms of some of the discussion on these two issues.
I think it will be.
Anything that you're keeping your eye on for next week outside of the topics that we talked about?
That's going to be the big one because like I said, Tainted Beef's kind of kind of wrapping itself up. There was this report on CBC today about self-harm and suicide attempts in prisons, which are spiking. That might get some traction next week. So we'll have to see.
All right. Take care. Until then.
All right.